Hello out there, you wonderful people. This is Andre, the Game ID guy. Thank you once again for lending me your time and your ear, listening into another Gamers Thoughts discussion. And this I'm going to be talking about Tears of the Kingdom being $70 DLC. I swear when people want to make an argument, they come up with the most ridiculous things that they can say at that point in time. And it's just like, it gets hilarious. Okay, so we're supposed to just concede and say, oh yeah, Tears of the Kingdom is definitely DLC for Breath of the Wild. Yeah, it's $70 DLC. Nintendo's horrible for charging that for this. Because people look at the game and see that it visually, yes, is aesthetically the same. And yes, they reuse assets. I mean, hey, there's another Legend of Zelda game that literally reused assets and was a sequel to the game before it. You know what game that was? Oh yeah, it was Majora's Mask. And that's a well-beloved Zelda game. At least now. I mean, before people hated on it a little bit. But it is now. And I get the feeling this is the same thing that's going to happen with Tears of the Kingdom, but the people's thought process is that, hey, this game shouldn't have taken as long to make as it did because they're going to reuse portions of assets. Not to also go about and say, hey, they basically added a whole nother map on top of the map you already had. You know, with all the broken pieces of Skyloft floating around that you can now travel to and move around on. As well as the fact that you have travel systems that they added in. There's different mechanics that were thrown into the engine. The coding had to be changed. I swear it's like people assume they know so much about game development. They really don't. They really truly don't. Now again, I don't know a lot about game development myself outside of what I've dabbled with. But the stuff I've dabbled with has been difficult. Not easy, not simple, drag and drop and go. Because yeah, there's definitely a lot of drag and drop stuff out there, and I'll tell you this right now, Tears of the Kingdom is not one of them. I can tell just from looking at that little bit of gameplay that they gave to us, from what you can see in there now, that it is on a whole different level from Breath of the Wild. It's not going to innovate visually, which needs to stop anyway because that ceiling has been hit hard. You're not going to get a whole lot more visually out of games now. And I made this argument back when the PS4 Pro was announced. We need to be working more on AI systems for these games versus AI, environment, physics engines versus worrying about visuals. Visuals are only going to go so far. Visuals can only be impressive for so long. And Nintendo was privy to this. It was pretty damn cut and clear that they were privy to this back during the Wii U when they started developing Breath of the Wild. I even said the same thing back then. If the PS4 Pro is so great, which is what this is ad-libbing. The PS4 Pro is so great. Why can't we have better AI systems for these games? Why are we just focused on making them more visually impressive for people? Visually impressive games are only going to get you so far. This should have been understood a while ago, when there was a definite drop-off in game quality during the 7th generation. Now, I can't blame those who are newer to gaming, who are younger in this sphere. I can't blame them for not recognizing this, but for the people that have been playing games for a long time, y'all should know better. Again, for those who are new to gaming, I understand where their mindsets are. They're wrong, but I understand where their mindsets are. But for the old heads in gaming, the people that have been gaming for 10 plus years at this point, you should know better. You should definitely know better. So, yeah. oh, it doesn't look like it took all that much work. Do you know how hard it was for them to code all those environment systems? Do you know how hard it was for them to code that merge system into the game where you can combine items on the fly? Like, you know how long that takes to put together? Something like that where you can take any two objects and combine them. I mean, it may not be any two objects. Obviously, there's going to be some limitations. But for it to feel like there's no limitations to it, that takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of time and effort. And on top of that, just from what they showed, it was seamless. It was smooth. Which meant that they spent countless hours just working on that one aspect of the game. Coding, recoding, fixing errors as they found them, refixing how the fucking I was about to say polygons, but refixing how the objects look and adhere to each other. That takes a shit ton of work. And there is no way in the world that they could have done that in less than 3 years. Just that system on its own would have taken that long. That doesn't count for the expansions to the world. That doesn't count for the new abilities that Link has. That doesn't account for the new movement system that is pretty damn apparent, even if it is stacked on top of the already prepared engine. So again, people are speaking out their behinds when they say this. And I'm being as polite as I can when I say this, but you're dead wrong. And this is not me defending Nintendo, because they do stuff that I will point out and say, hey, yeah, that was not the best idea. But when I look at this game, the quality of it versus the game that came before it, I can see the night and day differences, but then again, my mindset is like that, unlike a lot of people. I'm wired the same way that most video game developers are, as we have come to find out throughout the years, for anybody who's followed my channels and my social media. I tend to be wired the same way a video game developer is. I tend to think along the same lines. So my thing is, if you don't know how these things work, that's fine. But don't pretend that you know how they work or that you know how they should work. Because right now, I would challenge any developer right now to degrade their game to PS1 graphics and then come up with a good concept for a gameplay system and see if they can do it. Most of the developers today either can't do it because of time constraints or literally are unable to do it. And the time constraints things has to do with publishers. Nintendo, knowing that Tears of the Kingdom is going to be a massive game for them, they're going to give that team as much time as they need to work on it. They weren't going to cut corners on this. But again, this is also the same thing that happened back in the day from Ocarina of Time to Majora's Mask. The only difference was that was a much shorter time period for the development. And a lot of the stuff that they did in Majora's Mask was leftover ideas that they couldn't tuck into Ocarina of Time. If they could have, that game would have been wholly different. So it's one of those things where you have to kind of take your time and understand that, hey, this was a whole process. There was a lot more that went into this than you might think. In this game, I can tell you right now, just looking at the world size, it's almost doubled from what Breath of the Wild was. And that's probably thanks to Monolith Soft and how they like to make these sprawling large worlds that you have to traverse constantly. So maybe you could call me a Nintendo fanboy, I don't really care. But I'm just looking at the development of the game and what they showed off, and I can tell you honestly, this game is well away and above what Breath of the Wild does, and it'll be shown when people get their hands on it. Hell, people are still finding new stuff to do in Breath of the Wild now. What the hell do you think is going to happen with Tears of the Kingdom? Breath of the Wild came out, 2017? 6 years later, people are still finding new ways to work around things in that engine, in that game. And you really think that it would be super simple to just, oh, we're going to copy paste and be done, on top of adding in new mechanics. Y'all really don't know how the video game development works, and it shows. But I'm going to go ahead and end it here and not rant too much more. Thank you guys very much for listening, and keep your eyes and ears out for more stuff from me. And until the next time, please enjoy your games, and everybody, peace out.